The prosperous living standards which dominated American culture in the 1920s are flawlessly captured in F. Scott Fitzgerald's esteemed novel, The Great Gatsby. He illustrates the affairs of his fabricated cast of characters as they dwell in opulent mansions, attend lavish parties, and fulfill romantic desires unconditionally. These social engagements epitomize the decade of the 1920s and the affairs of Fitzgerald's characters. Put simply, life is good. But for Fitzgerald's characters, these good lives were not met with equally appealing fates. Contrarily, each character suffers an ill demise. Narrator Nick Carraway returns to a life of solitude. Tom and Daisy Buchanan are sentenced to remain in a faithless, loveless marriage. Tom's mistress, Myrtle Wilson, is killed in a car crash. Her death robs her husband George of what little mental stability he had. George takes his own life after killing the man he believes to be responsible for Myrtle's death, protagonist Jay Gatsby. If we consider the paradoxical nature of this finale in congruence with the apparent absence of religion in the plot of the story, an abstractly delivered facet of Fitzgerald's authorial intent emerges with blinding clarity. Fitzgerald saturates the text with subtle religious allusions to affirm the legitimacy of religion, which enables him to employ a societal warning. He wishes to make the public weary of his belief that the negligence to honor a higher power results in undesirable repercussions, as it does for every character in the story. The affairs of protagonist Jay Gatsby are directly and indisputably allegorical to the recorded experiences of the Christian Messiah, Jesus Christ. Gatsby's tendency to circumnavigate in responses prompts confusion from his acquaintances. A critic notes that many people who approached Jesus in his early ministry left pondering a riddle-like parable or non-committal response in a similar way. Additionally, Gatsby frequently hosts parties at which he provides masses of guests with an endless supply of alcohol. At a matrimonial celebration in Cana, Jesus famously morphed plain water into vats of wine. Many people rely on alcohol for various reasons. Gatsby, providing the substance that so many rely on, deems him a character others can confide in, a quality which he certainly shares with Jesus Christ. Furthermore, Fitzgerald subtly asserts a startling analogy, in which Daisy's relationship to Gatsby is equated to that of the disciple Judas to Jesus. The first time Gatsby locks lips with Daisy, he expresses an awareness that his mind would never romp again like the mind of God. With this kiss, he sacrifices the freedom of agency, because from this point on, his incessant regard for Daisy and her well-being influences every one of his decisions. Jesus, too, makes himself more vulnerable when he allows his disciples to accompany him to the Garden of Gethsemane. In doing so, he enables his supposed friend Judas to deliver the kiss which identifies him to his Roman enemies. Gatsby's first kiss with Daisy thrusts him into a vain quest for love which concludes with his murder, and Judas's kiss of betrayal catalyzes a series of events which leads to Jesus' crucifixion. Both Jay Gatsby and Jesus Christ are
betrayed with a kiss.
The indisputable similarities between the lives of Jay Gatsby and Jesus Christ verify Fitzgerald's incorporation of religious elements in this story. The eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg fulfill an essential figurative function. It is to convey the existence of a God or a higher power observing the terrestrial scene. They are the central focus of a billboard located in close proximity to the Valley of Ashes. Dr. T.J. Eckelberg's blue and gigantic eyeballs gaze at the grotesque scene before them through enormous yellow spectacles. This description presents a valuable message decipherable through the consideration of color symbolism. Archetypally, the color blue implies sadness, so it can be connoted through Fitzgerald's description that the higher power suffers some form of emotional grief as a result of observing the valley before him. Corruption is a commonly associated meaning of the color yellow, meaning that there is a boundary of corruption separating the higher power from its terrestrial inferiors. The source of this demoralization can be determined through analysis of the setting which Dr. T.J. Eckelberg's eyes directly monitor. It is the Valley of Ashes. The Valley of Ashes is a vast wasteland. Fitzgerald establishes a parallelism between the afflicted valley and the condition of mankind. As smoke and ashes foul the natural terrain of the valley, so does corruption taint the purity of the human race. Considering that the dismal Valley of Ashes is a manifestation of human-induced pollution, it can be deduced that humanity is also accountable for its own corruption. Literary analyst Tony Frederick suggests that this corruption occurs because nobody believes in God anymore. It is a trend which thrives under the complete control of those who willingly abandon their faith in a divine power. This tendency is exhibited frequently by Fitzgerald's characters. They fervently avoid laying their eyes upon the billboard, and therefore avoid acknowledging the existence of a higher power. Fitzgerald reveals that, in doing so, they contribute to their own corruption. Fitzgerald incorporates irony to reveal the detachment of society from religion. At one point, in describing one of Gatsby's gatherings, Nick Carraway recalls, "On Sunday morning, while church bells ring in the villages along shore, the world and its mistress returns to Gatsby's house and twinkled hilariously on his lawn." The caliber of the public's morality is indirectly condemned through this statement. By framing church and Gatsby's party as a simultaneous event, the clash between the ethical standards associated with religion and the carelessness associated with partying is projected. Because the world chooses to attend Gatsby's gathering rather than a religious service, it is made evident that society is inclined to disregard religious obligations when they conflict with social ones. Ultimately, Fitzgerald implements a complex syllogism through this description, revealing an unflattering observation of the current social condition. If partying is careless and everybody who parties disregard religion, then everybody who disregards religion is also careless. Later in the story, irony is utilized in a similar manner to convey the same clash of values between religion and society. The characters' boundless mentalities toward fulfilling romantic desires, regardless of who they hurt, serves as an additional indicator that their morals are slightly askew. At the climax of the story, the main members of the cast travel to a suite in New York City for an afternoon of entertainment. The extramarital affair between Gatsby and Daisy has flourished into an intricate scandal at this point. Daisy intends to leave Tom for Gatsby and attempts to reveal their plans to Tom on this particular outing. Delivered through the thoughts of Nick Carraway, Fitzgerald asserts that the party is listening to the portentous chords of Mendelssohn's Wedding March from the ballroom below. He is able to establish that a wedding ceremony is taking place without explicitly stating so in this brilliant use of understatement. The irony here revolves around the fact that one marriage is commencing as another is crumbling. Yet again, a religious occasion and a social rendezvous, one which religious establishments would strongly condemn, are ensuing simultaneously. As culprits of adultery, both Daisy and Tom defy the religious expectations of a married pair. The guilt for this offense is dispersed among other characters, however, including Gatsby and Nick. Gatsby, because he pursues Daisy despite the destruction he reaps upon her religious union with Tom, and Nick for facilitating their meetings. Defying the stipulations of the religious institution of marriage does not yield the same romantic gratification which the characters strive to procure in doing so. The absence of an authentic orthodoxy to motivate the strife for self-betterment inevitably prompts the transition to an inferior source of motivation, which in turn weakens the moral value of the eventual product of that pursuit. In Fitzgerald's fabricated setting, the mediocre substitute is the prospect of exceeding others in monetary gain. No longer are individuals governed by the internalized tribulations of an authentic mode of faith. They are inspired to outperform their counterparts to achieve as much as they can. Ultimately, the result is a world governed by materialistic ideals rather than spiritual. English professor Patricia Bizzell notes that ironically the most efficient way to succeed in a financial competition is through the emulation of the most qualified opponent. Essentially, the worst enemy becomes the primary model for success. J. Gatsby best supports this theory. In what is essentially an attempt to outperform his most competent rival, Tom Buchanan, Gatsby strives to covet Tom's wife. Tom is the official centerpiece of Daisy's affections. He possesses the love of the woman whom Gatsby falsely perceives as his personal holy grail. Gatsby believes that in order to attain Daisy's love, he must occupy an immense fortune, like Tom. Gatsby credits his financially driven pursuit for self-betterment to this logic. In actuality, however, it is his yearning to fulfill his propensity for achievement and to surpass Tom's achievements in the process which drives his dedicated quest. Daisy is reduced to a mere possession. Pursuing another man's wife and equating a human being to an object are both blatant violations of morally acceptable conduct which Gatsby commits in his disregard for religious inspiration. Having written this novel in the midst of the prosperous Roaring Twenties, Fitzgerald's propensity to interpret social conditions is made clear in the coming years of this story's 1925 publication. The decade ended in a drastic stock market crash which catalyzed the Great Depression. It was one of the darkest decades the nation has ever seen. Considering the message regarding religion which Fitzgerald delivers through The Great Gatsby, it is probable that, in his opinion, the higher power monitoring the human scene would not have been pleased with the combination of doubt in and disregard for religion which escalated in the U.S. as the 1920s progressed. Perhaps a supernatural power inflicted a punishment upon the ignorant citizens of the United States in the form of the Great Depression.